Hello दोस्तों, welcome back to my YouTube channel Need Biohub. In this lecture, we will be talking about the chapter number 17 of the class 11 biology, that is breathing and exchange of gases. So let us now start with the chapter breathing and exchange of gases. They are saying that breathing is commonly known as respiration. I want to highlight one point in this thing that breathing and respiration both are not the same thing. They are though used commonly in layman terms interchangeably, but they are two different things. Breathing is just only the exchange of gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide, that is which when it is being exchanged between the atmosphere and the human being, that is called breathing. But a respiration is a more holistic term in which it comprises of not just breathing. It comprises of transport of oxygen from atmosphere to the lungs, where the alveoli transports it further by diffusion into our blood cells, and from blood cells it is then transferred to the cells of our body. There in the cells it is then transported to the actual site of usage, where actually the oxygen is being used, and carbon dioxide which is being produced by the cells, metabolically active cells, they releases the carbon dioxide, and it is then brought back by the blood to the alveoli. So that this whole process from intake of gas to the delivery to the alveoli, from alveoli to the blood to the cells, from cells back to the blood, and then from blood back to the atmosphere. This process is called respiration, while breathing is only just exchange of O2 and next, the topic is respiratory organs. See, the respiratory organs are of various type. Every organism has a different mode of breathing, different mode of respiration. And in this paragraph, they are talking about different types of organisms. See, in the second line, they have mentioned lower invertebrates like sponges, coelentrates, and flatworms. I want to first tell you what are the vertebrates and invertebrates. See, vertebrates and invertebrates are two classes of organisms which are divided on the basis of whether they have vertebral column present or not. Vertebral column in Hindi terms it is known as रीढ़ की हड्डी. जिन ऑर्गेनिजम्स के पास में रीढ़ की हड्डी होती है वो वर्टिब्रेट्स कहलाते हैं. जिनके पास में रीढ़ की हड्डी नहीं होती, जिनके पास में वर्टिब्रा कॉलम नहीं है, वो हमारे इनवर्टिब्रेट्स होते हैं. इनवर्टिब्रेट्स में जैसे कि यहाँ पे मेंशन्ड है सीलेंट्रेट्स, स्पॉन्जेस, प्लेटफॉर्म्स. ठीक है. अब ये जो ऑर्गेनिजम्स होते हैं जो लोअर इनवर्टिब्रेट्स हैं, इनके पास में कोई स्पेशलाइज्ड कोई ऑर्गन नहीं है रेस्पिरेशन के लिए. सो दे एक्सचेंज O2 विथ CO2 बाय सिंपल डिफ्यूजन ओवर देयर एंटायर बॉडी सरफेस. सो यहाँ पे क्या हो रहा है कि सिंपल डिफ्यूजन के थ्रू द एंटायर बॉडी सरफेस के माध्यम से ये ऑक्सीजन और CO2 को एक्सचेंज करते हैं. क्योंकि जब भी डिफ्यूजन होता है वहाँ पर में जो हमारी डिफ्यूजन के आसपास की जो मेम्ब्रेन होती है जिसके थ्रू डिफ्यूजन हो रहा है, वो मेम्ब्रेन हमारी हमेशा मॉइस्ट होनी चाहिए. अदरवाइज इन अ ड्राई surface exchange of gases cannot take place. So take this note in your mind that always diffusion takes place on a moist surface. And next we have this earthworms. Earthworms use moist cuticle, and insects have a network of tubes. See, earthworms have a moist cuticle. Cuticle is a kind of a structure present on this on the body surface of the earthworms, which is moist. See, as I have told you that why it is moist. It is moist so as to facilitate the exchange of gases between atmosphere and the organisms. And while in case of insects have a network of tubes. See, insects have a network of tubes. These tubes are called tracheal tubes. In the next photo, I will show you the photo of the tracheal tubes. See this photo. Tracheal tubes are like a straw, types of a straw. If you want to imagine it, then you can imagine it like a straw which is being branched into many straws, and these straws are allowing the passage of air. So here, as you can see, O2 is entering inside and CO2 is getting out. This from there the O2 is entering, okay, and when it enters, it passes through these tubes. These tubes then divide and further divide, and they transport the oxygen and CO2 to the cells directly. There is no mode of transportation medium is being used. Like in human beings, we use blood to transport oxygen by dissolving it into the blood or by combining it with the hemoglobin. But in this case, in the insect's case, there is no use of blood for the transport of gases. There is directly the air, the cells which are using the air, the cells which are using the O2, and the cells which are uh, giving back the CO2. They are directly in contact with the air in this case. Okay, so this is the point in tracheal tubes. Coming back, while in case of while some organisms have special vascularized structure called gills. See, vascularized means that it is highly vascular. Vascular is the word which we use when some part of the body has a very rich blood supply. So it is very vascularized structure. Like it is here mentioned that gills in the aquatic organisms, these are highly vascularized structure because blood is coming and blood is taking the oxygen from the water and then it is transporting to the other organs of the body. Okay, so gills are used by most of the aquatic arthropods and molluscs. ठीक है, whereas vascularized bag हमारे में कौन सा है? Lungs. We have lungs. Okay, these are used by the terrestrial organ or terrestrial forms for the exchange of gases. Terrestrial are those organisms which live on the land. Okay, so among vertebrates, अब यहाँ पर ये बात करें कुछ वर्टिब्रेट्स की. वर्टिब्रेट्स में कौन कौन से आ गए? जैसे फिशेज हो गए, ओके, रेप्टाइल्स हो गए, बर्ड्स हो गए, मैमल्स हो गए. तो ये जो ऑर्गेनिजम्स है, फिशेस, रेप्टाइल्स, बर्ड्स एंड मैमल्स, ये है वर्टिब्रेट्स. इन वर्टिब्रेट्स के अंदर में द ऑर्गेनिज्म fishes, particularly fishes, they uses gills, while the other organisms like reptiles, birds, and mammals, they respire through lungs. And next, they are talking about the amphibians. Amphibians are those organisms which have two phases of their life cycle. They complete their life cycle on two medium. Cannot complete their life cycle in just a single medium, that is only water or only land. They need to go to the water for few stages of their life and they come back to the land for few stages of their life. So amphibians like frogs can respire through moist skin also. Amphibians के अंदर mode of respiration क्या है? That is their moist skin. Mammals, they have a well developed respiratory system. Now what is the mammals? Mammals are those organisms which have a mammary glands. Every animal who has a mammary gland is known as mammals. Like we human beings are mammals. Coming on to the next page. Now we will talk about the human respiratory organs. What all organs are involved in the human respiratory system? Okay, so coming on to the first line, that is we have a pair of external nostrils opening out above the upper lips. So we have two nostrils which are opening above the upper lips. It leads to a nasal chamber through the nasal passage. That is the nasal chamber opens into the nasopharynx, which is a portion of pharynx. Right now I'm just reading the lines. I will show you the photograph of the exact diagram of how is the nasal chamber and how is the nasal pharynx. Then you will get to understand more about this and easily you will able to understand this topic. The nasal chamber opens into the nasopharynx, which is a portion of pharynx. See, pharynx has two portions. One is the nasopharynx and another is the oropharynx. Nasopharynx is that part of the pharynx which is involved in the transfer of in the transport of air. And while the oropharynx is involved in all those things which we take into our oral cavity, that is the food or the water we drink, that passes through the oropharynx part of the pharynx. Okay, so the pharynx is the common passage for food and air. Okay, the nasopharynx opens through glottis of the larynx into the trachea. Now coming on to the photo, this photo. Here you can see that these are our pair of nostrils. Okay, and this is our mouth. This part is the, let me change the color. See, this part is the mouth. Okay, air enters through the nostrils, it passes into the nasal cavity. This is the nasal cavity, and then from nasal cavity it passes into the nasopharynx. This part is the nasopharynx. While when the food enters from the mouth, this portion, as you can see, this is the bone. This part is the bone. This is your mandible bone, while this is the maxillary bone, the upper bone or upper jaw, and this is the lower jaw. And these pointed structure, as you can see, this is our tooth. This is our lower incisors, and while this is our upper incisor. And between this, when the food enters, it passes into our oral cavity. From oral cavity, it enters into the oropharynx. This part is the oropharynx, where the food bolus, after getting chewed by our teeth, and then it passes into the oropharynx. Okay, from nasopharynx and oropharynx, both the things are coming. While in the pharynx, there is a cartilaginous box which is known as larynx. Let me show you. Okay, the nasopharynx opens through glottis into the larynx. Now the thing is that we have two pipes over here. One pipe is this, and the other pipe is this. Okay, the one pipe which is anteriorly placed, this is our windpipe. Okay, this is our windpipe. ठीक है, and this is our food pipe. Okay, so when the air enters into our pharynx, then after reaching up to the this part, larynx, there is opening of the windpipe. Now the air can enter into the stomach, or the food can enter into the windpipe. So as to prevent this and to have a controlled movement of food and the controlled movement of air, we have a structure called epiglottis. See, epiglottis is a flap like structure. This helps to prevent the food entering into the windpipe. Okay, when see, we have these two pipes, windpipe and food pipe. Here you can see, during swallowing, glottis during swallowing, glottis can be covered by a thin cartilaginous flap called epiglottis. Okay, and see, after entering, and this helps us to prevent the entry of food into the larynx, what I have already mentioned. Yeah, now we will talk about the trachea. Trachea is a tube which is trachea is a straight tube extending up to the mid thoracic cavity. So now the question is, what is this mid thoracic cavity? See, we have divided our vertebral column into five parts, five vertebrae, five types of vertebrae. That is cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal. Cervical are the seven vertebrae which are present at the our neck region, and then comes the thoracic vertebrae. These are 12 in number. Then we have five in number, the lumbar vertebrae, and then we have sacral vertebrae, and then only single, that is the coccygeal, which is also known as tailbone. Okay, so we have seven cervical, C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C7, and then we have the thoracic vertebrae. So the thoracic vertebrae region is known as the thoracic cavity. The cavity which is being formed because of the vertebral column at the back and the sternum in the anterior portion and the laterally by the ribs. This whole cavity which is being formed, this is known as the thoracic cavity. And the trachea continues as a straight tube up to the mid thoracic cavity, where it divides. So this it divides at the fifth thoracic vertebra. As I have already told you that we have 12 thoracic vertebrae. It divides at the fifth thoracic vertebra into the right and the left primary bronchi. The trachea divides into the left primary bronchi and the right primary bronchi. That further divides into primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, and further into bronchioles. That is primary bronchiole, secondary bronchiole, tertiary bronchioles. I will show you in this photo. This photo, you can see. See, we have this larynx. Larynx, from this we have this trachea. Trachea then divides at the fifth thoracic cavity. This is the fifth thoracic. Sorry, this it divides at the fifth thoracic vertebrae. At this point, it divides into primary bronchi. This is primary bronchi. Okay. Then secondary bronchi. This is the primary bronchi, and then it divides into secondary bronchi. Then it divides into tertiary bronchi. Tertiary bronchi. This is tertiary bronchi. And then from bronchi, it further divides into very fine tubes called bronchioles. Okay. And this whole thing is present into the cavity known as thoracic cavity. This thoracic cavity has anteriorly it is being covered by the sternum, laterally by these ribs. These ribs cover it laterally. Okay, here we have anatomically we have sternum, and these are our ribs, 12 pair of ribs. Okay, and posteriorly, if you look at this whole model posteriorly, then posteriorly we will find that there are thoracic vertebrae. Okay, coming back to the theory, each bronchi undergoes repeated division to form secondary and tertiary bronchi, the bronchioles, and the bronchioles ending up into very thin terminal bronchioles. As I already told you that those terminal bronchioles are very thin, and the trachea, the primary, this point is very important. I repeat this, that trachea, primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchi and initial bronchioles are supported by incomplete cartilaginous rings. See, what is the function of these cartilaginous rings? That imagine it as a pipe of air. When air is passing through that pipe, and a lot of air is flushing through it, then what will happen that you will find that inside the pipe suddenly there is a decrease in the pressure, and suddenly there is an excess increase in the pressure. This sudden increase and decrease in pressure may lead to the collapse of this pipe. So in order to prevent this condition, we have this incomplete cartilaginous ring. These rings prevent those pipes, those tubes from collapsing. So the main function of these incomplete cartilaginous ring is to protect our windpipe, is to protect our trachea, primary, secondary, tertiary bronchi, and the initial bronchioles from collapsing. Okay. Each terminal bronchiole gave rise to a very thin, irregularly walled, vascularized bag-like structure called alveoli. Now the exact area where actually the diffusion of air takes place, where actually the exchange of air takes place, that is our alveoli. At the end of each terminal bronchioles, we have very thin, irregularly, that their shape are not fixed, and these are walled. They have a wall because we need any permeable membrane, so that air can move from lungs to the blood, and these are irregularly walled, vascularized because they have a lot of blood vessels, bag-like structure because their structure looks like a bag, which is known as the alveoli. The branching network of bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli comprises the lungs. So this point is very important. Question can be asked from this line, that what comprises of the lungs? The lung comprises of bronchi, bronchioles, and alveoli. Okay. Next line, we have two lungs. This is not important. This line is important, that we have a double layered pleura with pleural fluid between them. See, our lungs have a double layered membrane. The walls of the lungs have two walls. These are two layered walls. Similarly, our heart has a three paired walls. That is the cardiums, pericardium, endocardium, mesocardium. Okay, so our lungs has a two double walled, and the walls have a fluid between them, so as to reduce friction on the lung surface. See, what happens is that the outer wall of the lungs is in direct contact with the ribs. We cannot directly alter the volume of our lungs. We cannot alter the movement of our lungs. We can actually alter the movement of our thoracic cavity. The thoracic cavity, which I have already told you, that we can actually alter the movement of thoracic cavity. We can increase the volume of thoracic cavity, we can decrease the volume of thoracic cavity. Once we increase the volume of thoracic cavity, the volume of pulmonary cavity, that is the volume of our lungs, it automatically increases. And due to this increase in the volume of pulmonary cavity, there is a decrease in the pressure in the lungs. And as you have already read in your chemistry NCRT, that as if volume increases, the pressure decreases. If volume decreases, the pressure increases. So this you will read in couple of minutes. let us now read the lines. It reduces the see, there is a medical condition called pleural effusion. This is usually this is a condition in which there is an increase in the volume of pleural fluid, and it is usually seen in the cases of bacterial infection, or if there is tuberculosis. Then we see this condition that there is increase in the volume of fluid, and if you see on the X-rays, then you will find that it looks radio opaque. Whiteness is white structure is seen on the X-rays of a pleural effusion patient. Okay. See, the outer pleural membrane, what I have already told you, the outer pleural membrane is in close contact with the thoracic lining. Okay, what I have already told you, it is that the outer surface of the pleural membrane is in close contact with the thoracic lining, whereas the inner pleural membrane is in contact with the lung surface. The part starting with the external nostril up to the terminal bronchioles constitute the conducting part, whereas the alveoli and the ducts from the respiratory or exchange part of the respiratory system. See what they are trying to say, that the outer wall of the lung is in very close contact with the thoracic lining, whereas the inner pleural membrane is in close contact with the lung surface. Okay, and in order to prevent friction between these two surfaces, we have a fluid called pleural fluid. Okay, and they are next they are telling is that the part starting from the external nostril, where as we have read that air passes from external nostril, external nasal chamber, nasal cavity, then the nasopharynx, and then trachea, larynx. So what they are trying to say that the part starting from the external nostril up to the terminal bronchioles, So it is including primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchi, primary bronchiole, secondary bronchiole, tertiary bronchi, up to this whole part, the whole journey of air from the nostril to the terminal bronchiole, it constitutes a conducting part. So what I want to tell you is that during this whole path, there is no diffusion of gas. There is the air is only just moving in this. Air is not being used by any cell, or it is not being transferred into our body by these part. Only and only it is the alveoli which is the only structure where the air is actually transported and where it is actually diffused into our blood. So at this point you have to remember that it is alveoli which is the only part in our in the whole mechanism, whole movement of the air, where the actual respiration or the actual transfer of air takes place, where the actual diffusion of air takes place. The conducting part, so what is the function of this whole conducting part? The conducting part transports the atmospheric air to the alveoli. What it does, it clears it from foreign particles, it humidifies the air, it also brings the air to the body temperature. So it has three functions. First, it removes the every foreign particles which are present in the air. Either it is a bacteria or a virus or any kind of a foreign particle or any aerosols. It is removing, it is filtering all those foreign particles by what we have hairs in our nostrils, and we have mucus secretion by our windpipe, by the trachea, by the bronchioles. See, you have this condition whenever you have a cold, then definitely you have seen that you have running nose. So why there is a running nose? Because there is irritation. So as to remove those foreign particles which are present, our body has a mechanism of defending ourselves. It does so by increasing the mucus secretion of our windpipe. So by this way, it is trapping those foreign particles which are coming from outside, and the air which is coming from the atmosphere, it can be either dry air or it can be a humid air. So it is what if it is a dry air, it has to humidify the air, and next it brings the air to the body temperature. See, next the line is the exchange part. The only part in the whole circulation of air, the exchange part, which is the actual site of diffusion of O2 and CO2 between blood and atmospheric air, that is only the alveoli. The lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber. Thoracic chamber we have already read about, which is an anatomically tight, airtight chamber. Anatomically airtight, how it is anatomically airtight? The thoracic chamber is formed dorsally by the vertebral column. Dorsally माने कि पीछे से हमारे वर्टिब्रल कॉलम ने उसे कवर कर रखा है. Ventrally by the sternum, laterally by the ribs, एंड ऑन द लोअर साइड नीचे की तरफ से कहाँ से उसको कवर कर रखा है? बाय द डोम शेप्ड डायफ्राम. हमारा डोम शेप्ड डायफ्राम ने उसको पूरी तरह से एनाटॉमिकली एयर टाइट चैम्बर बना दिया है. नाउ व्हाट हैपेंस इज दैट दिस, if there is any change in the volume of thoracic cavity, this will be reflected in the pulmonary cavity. Pulmonary is word which is commonly being used in medical science for the lungs. Okay, so if there is any little change in the thoracic cavity, the change is directly reflected in the pulmonary cavity. So what happens is that when we inhale, we are actually not directly increasing the volume of pulmonary cavity, we are actually increasing the volume of thoracic cavity. When this thoracic cavity is increasing, the outer layer of the lungs, which is the outer pleural membrane, which is in direct contact with the thoracic cavity, that is expanding, that is moving. So with this movement, the inner wall of the lungs, which is the inner pleural membrane, it also starts moving out. And as the lungs start expanding, see what happens is that the lungs, as the lungs are expanding, there is increase in the volume. When there is an increase in the volume, what happens is that the pressure decreases. You have read in the chemistry this formula, P is inversely proportional to volume. We have read this formula, PV is equal to nRT. If we keep the nR and temperature constant, then pressure is inversely proportional to volume. If volume increases, then pressure has to decrease. See what, when lungs are expanding, volume is increasing, so the inner pressure of the lungs is decreasing. And as you have read, that air moves from high pressure to low pressure, and the pressure inside the lungs is low because of expansion of the lungs. Then the pressure in the lungs is low, and the pressure outside the outside atmosphere is the 1 atm pressure. Then that pressure is higher than the pressure which is in the lungs. So what happens? Air will flow inside our lungs. This is the reason why we are able to breathe, why we are able to inhale air inside in our body. Such an arrangement is essential for breathing, as we cannot directly alter the pulmonary volume. Okay, we cannot directly alter the pulmonary volume. This line is very important. This can be very easily asked in assertion reason questions or in statement wise question. Can we directly alter the pulmonary volume? No, we cannot directly alter the pulmonary volume. We can only alter the volume of thoracic chamber. And with this, due to this direct relation between the thoracic volume and the pulmonary volume, there is increase or decrease in the volume of the pulmonary cavity or the pulmonary volume. So the respiration involves following steps: breathing or pulmonary ventilation. See, I have already told you in the first line of this chapter that breathing or the pulmonary ventilation, breathing is also known as pulmonary ventilation, by which atmospheric air is drawn in and CO2 rich alveolar air is released out. Bus. Breathing is only just this part, that atmospheric air, from atmospheric air O2 is coming inside and CO2 rich alveolar air is moving outside. This part is up to this part breathing is done. But respiration is not just breathing, it involves diffusion of O2 and CO2 across alveolar membrane. It involves the transport of gases by the blood. The gas which is dissolved, or it is in combination with the hemoglobin, it has to transport to the other cells of the body. Okay, and after reaching those parts of the body where the O2 and CO2 are being used, it has to again diffuse into these cells or these tissues, and these O2 is being utilized by those cells which are involved in catabolic reactions. As a result, CO2 is produced, which is being released by these cells, and this CO2 is again transported back by the by the cells of the blood, and the blood itself back to the alveolar region and from alveolar region, the CO2 is released into the atmosphere. Okay. Next, we will talk about the mechanism of breathing, how exactly we are able to breathe. All those things which I've already explained you, the same things are mentioned in this paragraph. I will just read this paragraph so that you can easily correlate what I have already told you. If there is anything I need to explain, I will explain it again. See, breathing involves two stages: inspiration, during which atmospheric air is drawn in, and expiration, by which alveolar air is released out. ओके सिंपल इट इज़ वेरी सिंपल टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट इंस्पिरेशन इंस्पायर करना, अंदर लेना है एयर को, जो एटमॉस्फेरिक एयर है उसको अंदर लेना. एक्सपायर करना मतलब कि कोई चीज़ को बाहर निकालना. तो जो हमारी एल्वियोलर की एयर है उसको हम बाहर निकाल रहे हैं. द मूवमेंट ऑफ एयर इनटू एंड आउट ऑफ द लंग्स is carried out by creating a pressure gradient in between the lungs and the atmosphere. Inspiration can occur if the pressure within the lungs, that is the intrapulmonary pressure, is less than the atmospheric pressure. I have already told you, if volume is increasing, then the pressure is decreasing, and the atmospheric pressure is high, then the air has to move inside the lung. And that is, there is a negative pressure. Negative because the pressure of the lungs is lesser than the atmospheric pressure, so it is a negative pressure than in the lungs with respect to atmospheric pressure. Similarly, when expiration is taking place, similarly when expiration takes place, then the intrapulmonary pressure is higher than the atmospheric pressure. जो हमारा प्रेशर लंग्स के अंदर हमें है, जब हम एक्सपायर करते हैं, जब हम सांस छोड़ते हैं, तो हमारा जो थोरैसिक वॉल्यूम है हम उसको कंप्रेस करके कम कर देते हैं. जब वॉल्यूम कम होगा प्रेशर ज़्यादा बढ़ जाएगा, लंग्स के अंदर प्रेशर हाई होगा, एटमॉस्फेयर प्रेशर कम होगा, तो एयर ऑटोमेटिकली बाहर निकल जाएगी. This movement of the thoracic chamber is being done by the diaphragm and a specialized set of muscles. There are a specialized set of muscles which helps in this movement of uh, the thoracic cavity. These are the external and internal intercostal muscles between the ribs. We have a 12 pair of ribs. Between these ribs, we have few muscles. These muscles are known as internal and external intercostal muscles. These are known as intercostal muscles. Okay, those muscles which are placed externally, means more ventrally, they are known as the external costal muscles, and those muscles which are present between or inside, they are known as internal intercostal muscles. These muscles are actively involved, along with the diaphragm, are actively involved in the generation of such gradients. ये इन्वॉल्व होती है वो ग्रेडियंट को बनाने में, प्रेशर ग्रेडियंट को बनाने में. इंस्पिरेशन इज इनिशिएटेड, जब इंस्पिरेशन हमें करना होता है तो हमें थोरैसिक वॉल्यूम को इंक्रीज करना है. तो ये जो इंटरकॉस्टल मसल्स होती है ये कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करती है, दे कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. इंस्पिरेशन इज इनिशिएटेड बाय द कॉन्ट्रैक्शन ऑफ डायफ्राम which increases the volume of the thoracic chamber in the antero-posterior axis. There is contraction of diaphragm. There is an increase in the volume of the thoracic chamber in the antero-posterior axis. See, we need to remember this part that जब डायफ्राम में कॉन्ट्रैक्शन होगा तो डायफ्राम, मैं फोटो में आपको दिखाता हूँ ये चीज़, ये देखिए, ये हमारा डायफ्राम है. ये हमारा जब डायफ्राम कॉन्ट्रैक्ट करेगा तो ये डायफ्राम की जो मूवमेंट होती है वो नीचे होती है, डाउनवर्ड की तरफ में. जब ये नीचे की तरफ मूव करेगा तो एंटेरो पोस्टीरियर एक्सिस के अंदर में हमारा जो वॉल्यूम है थोरैसिक चेंबर का वो इंक्रीज कर जाएगा. ठीक है. और जब कॉन्ट्रैक्शन होगी हमारी एक्सटर्नल इंटरकॉस्टल मसल्स के अंदर में, तो क्या होगा कि हमारी जो रिब्स होती है या फिर जो हमारा स्टर्नम है वो इंक्रीज कर देंगे वॉल्यूम को थोरैसिक चेंबर के. और वो मूवमेंट जो होती है जिसके कारण वॉल्यूम में इंक्रीज होता है डॉर्सो वेंट्रल एक्सिस के अंदर में. डॉर्सो वेंट्रल मतलब कि आगे और पीछे, फ्रंट एंड बैक. एंड एंटेरो पोस्टीरियर हो गया मतलब कि एंटीरियर आगे की तरफ में, ऊपर में, और एंटेरो पोस्टीरियर नीचे की तरफ में, एंटेरो पोस्टीरियर एक्सिस. ये चीज़ इंपॉर्टेंट है, याद रखने की. क्वेश्चन यहाँ पे ज़रूर आ सकते हैं. Contraction of diaphragm is causing an increase in the volume of in the antero-posterior axis, while the contraction of external intercostal muscles is causing an increase in the volume in the dorsoventral axis. Okay. So, because of the contraction of both diaphragm and external intercostal muscles, there is an overall increase in the thoracic volume. There is this causes a similar increase in the pulmonary volume, and as there is an increase in the pulmonary volume, there is a decrease in the pulmonary pressure. The pressure is lesser than the atmospheric pressure, which forces the air from outside to move into the lungs. This process is known as inspiration. A relaxation of the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles. This returns the diaphragm and the sternum to their normal positions. As a result, there is a reduction in the thoracic volume, thereby, there is a reduction in the pulmonary volume. This leads to an increase in the pulmonary pressure. The pressure is slightly above the atmospheric pressure, causing an expulsion of air from the lungs, which causes an expiration. I have already taught you all this concept. I hope you can understand this very well. We have the ability to increase the strength of inspiration and expiration with the help of additional muscles in the abdomen. You have to remember this point, that the depth and the strength of inspiration and the expiration can be increased with the help of additional muscles which are present in the abdomen. On an average, a healthy human being breathes 12 to 16 times a minute. The volume of air involved in breathing movements can be estimated with the use of a device called spirometer. This device is clinically used in the assessment of the pulmonary functions. With this, we complete the first part of this chapter. We will be bringing the second part of this chapter. And so, till then, keep studying and good luck.